Well, we started this series called The Real Thing just a couple weeks ago, and we're going through this book of James. And James is a little bit of an unusual book in that it's not just about nice ideas and spirituality and kind of concepts or faith. He takes it down and says, okay, you believe this, you know this, you've heard this, so what are you going to do? James always drives us to this place of action because he doesn't want us to live in just this kind of nice in-between land of religion and just say, oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I believe. See, it's easy to say all those things. And James is going to drive it in further and say, yes, you believe that, but how are you living? And how has it changed your responses and your activity? What is different about you because of what Christ has done in you? And he's like this older brother who isn't going to let you slack and isn't going to let you just kind of glide by. He's going to call you on it. And all through this book, James keeps calling us on these deep issues and saying, whoa. You believe this and you know this and you've experienced Christ, so what are you going to do? How is this going to change in you? And what we're going to look at today is one of those passages where he just drives it in deep. So I'm going to take you back on a little bit of a journey. How many of you, this is an easy question, how many of you remember high school? Remember that? Yeah, okay. So for some of you, that was not that long ago. Some of you maybe still are in high school. For some of you, it was like a long time ago. But remember what happens every May, those last 2 weeks of school? Remember what happens? They hand out the yearbooks. And you go through and you look at all the pictures and try to find yourself and your friends and all those things. And a yearbook has all these different sections, of course, of sports and activities and hobbies and all that. But the bulk of a yearbook is divided into 4 main sections, right? Pictures of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Every high school. You just kind of have those categories. And we lived in those different worlds, right? Remember when you're in high school, you're a freshman, you're learning everything and starting out. Sophomores, you get to have a lot of spirit and do all that. But all through school, you kind of stayed in that category. But all of us also knew that those weren't the only categories in high school, right? Those weren't the only places we lived. Those weren't the only kind of subgroups. There were all kinds of environments and there were all kinds of really kind of classifications that we found ourselves in high school. Think about that. There were the jocks, there were the band kids, there were, it was the chess club and the drama club. There was FFA for the ag kids. There were the brains and the stoners. There are all these different groups that we're involved in, right? You knew that. Some of you are going, yeah, I was in some of those groups. I don't know. But we found ourselves in those different categories. And sometimes we looked at the other groups, sometimes with envy. I wish I could be like them. And then we looked at other groups, like with those guys, the losers. We had our day, and we just kind of did the name calling, and we put people into groups, and we kept those little classifications. Now, we graduated from high school, and we realized that the names changed, but we were still in these subgroups in our culture, maybe based on our work environment, or again, if we went on to higher education, or if it was a political persuasion or whatever it might be. We found ourselves again in these different classifications in life. And here's the little secret that we all carry, is that we all have lists. We all have lists that we still keep right up here, and we don't tell anyone that, and a lot of times we don't even acknowledge it, but we know in our mind who's kind of desirable and who's undesirable, and who's in and who's out, and who's acceptable and who's unacceptable. And we just keep doing the same thing over. We diminish some people, and we honor others. And again, we show favoritism, and we show kind of positive towards one and we'll show negative towards another. We'll give in one instance and we'll pull back in another, all because we've put people into the slots, and usually it's from an external perspective. Now, as we jump into James here, you need to understand that it's into this secret kind of class system that James begins to speak to these people that he's writing to. They all know it. They've all seen it. And all he's doing is pulling back the curtain and saying, I want you guys to take a good look at this, and it's for a good reason. So look at verse 1. James writes this, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim that you have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people more than others. Now, over the rest of this message, I'm going to just kind of do a few verses at a time. So I just want you to kind of keep it right there in James and follow along with me. But James starts by making this crazy claim. He says, how can it be that you can say, I know Jesus Christ, and yet you treat people in different ways? You look at some just on the external and you say, acceptable, and you shove others to the side. You push them into the shadows, into the margins, and say, you are unacceptable. How can that really be? And he starts with this interesting phrase. He says, my dear brothers and sisters. So I'm just going to give you a hint for the rest of James. Anytime he says, my dear brothers and sisters, brace yourself, okay? Because he is about ready to let you have it. It's kind of like he's bringing you in close. Hey, buddy. Hey, what's going on? That's what he's doing. And so he challenges everyone with this. Now listen, as he's addressing these followers of Jesus, he's addressing people and addressing their faith at this deep level. And he's saying, come on, guys. It's more than externals. It's more than just words. It's more than just this nice idea of belief. It's got to filter into the way you live every day. And he brings them back to Jesus, which is where we always have to go. Who all his life, Jesus, was in the wrong crowds on the outside, who knew what it was like to be excluded. And James is telling these people, listen, you don't just know about this. You've experienced this transformation that comes in Christ. You know that there was nothing you could do to earn the salvation and the grace that you've received. You know that you couldn't be good enough. You couldn't be right enough. You couldn't be holy enough. It didn't matter what your background was. It didn't matter what your family tree was. You know that Jesus looked beyond all of the external things, and he looked deep into you, and he called out who he created you to be. He says, I know who you are. And the crazy thing is, you go all through the Bible, and you see Jesus' encounters with people. From the high to the very low, he doesn't look at the externals. He calls out what's deep in their heart. Think about this time. It was in the book of John, chapter 3. And you don't need to turn there, but one of the most famous verses in the Bible is in that encounter Jesus had, John 3:16, where he said, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Do you know who he said that to? He said that to a religious leader who kind of came to Jesus late in the night when no one could see him. And he was like, Jesus, what are you really all about? Are you really the Messiah? What is this life that you offer? And Jesus didn't look at all the trappings of wealth and authority that he had. He called out to him and he said, listen, I see something in you, but here's what life really is. And he spoke truth. Remember that other time that woman was about ready to be condemned because of her adultery? And Jesus steps in and says, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, if any of you are without sin, cast the first stone. And they all walked away. And he turned to this woman. And he said, where have all your accusers gone? She said, I don't know. And he said, well, I don't accuse you either, but go and sin no more. He called out something deep in her. It didn't matter what she had done and what her past was. He was calling out to say, come on, take a new step. Let something deep happen in you. And James is writing to these people who know that, who've experienced that, who are living that. And now, ironically, they're making decisions and showing favor simply based on the externals of someone. And James calls them back to Jesus and says, I want your faith to be substantial. I want it to go all through you. I want it to be the real thing. You see, it's no accident that Jesus came in human form. He was born into an ethnic group that's been persecuted and excluded for centuries. He was born into a working class family. Dad was a carpenter. He was born into that, not into family power, not into prestige, not into wealth. He was not a graduate of the accepted religious schools of the day. Even though he was God in the flesh, he left the wonder of heaven and all of that, and he humbled himself to extend a revolutionary kind of love to all kinds of people, the high and the low, the people who live in the margins, the people who lived in shame and guilt, the people who had no other place to connect, the people who were trying to, I wonder if God could ever love me. And he stepped into that and he saw something deep in them. But it was about the heart. And so James is going to call us to this place of examining ourselves. I'm going to give you a few things to write down, okay? Write this down for number one. I'm making judgments on what I can see. This is simply what we do. We do it all the time. We make judgments on what we can see. Now, there's a part in the Old Testament where this, I won't tell you the whole story, but this encounter takes place. And these people were looking at the stature of people, how they appeared. And it was this moment where God says, listen, you look at the outside, but I'm looking at the heart. Now, the problem for us is we don't get to see the heart, right? We don't have any kind of x-ray vision. We don't have any way to do that. So our natural tendency is simply to look at the outside. But James is going to call us to consider something else in this. Now, this word favoritism that's used here in James chapter 2 comes from a Greek word which means receiving the face. Don't you like that? It means receiving the face. Now, when I first looked that up and read that, the only time I use a phrase like that is when you're doing something in sports and you go, in your face, right? We do that to someone. So this week when my team lost, there were people that came and said, in your face, the Dodgers are doing it. And it was like, oh man, we had to live with that. Still are having to live with that, some of you guys. But that's how we use that phrase. But that's not really what the word means. We would translate it more accurately as accepting someone at face value. In other words, what we can see is what we get. I'm going to judge you based on your externals, on the face, on the outward, rather than the inside. And again, God is going to call us to something else. But think about in our culture today, and these little unpublished lists in our minds, that we put people into categories and we define them and we accept or won't accept them on all these different criteria. Think about some of these things. Looks and beauty, or lack thereof. We'll make judgments and make decisions based on what we see. How someone dresses, the type of clothes. Think of even our culture, think of books that have come out, Dress for Success, which obviously I didn't read. But anyway, Dress for Success. And, it's like, so how you can put yourself together is going to make an impression. And here the thing is, it's true. We do make an impression on those things, but it's whether we see someone as being valuable or unvaluable in that. We look at someone based on the kind of wealth or possessions they have, what they've acquired, the kind of education that they have. We look at white collar versus blue collar in careers and employment. We look at race and we look at ethnicity. And we make judgment calls and decisions based on the color of someone's skin or the kind of clothes or garb they may wear based on a religion or background that they come from. And we may push them away figuratively, emotionally, because we're afraid of what we've seen come out of a religion or a race, or we may base that on some preconceived notion that we've had, or maybe it's just flat out discrimination on our part, but we make those calls and categorize people. How about this? Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative. And you're thinking, oh, we're not going there. Please, Dave, don't go there today. Don't do that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But can I tell you this? If James was here right now, you know what he would say? Yes, you have to go to those places. You have to look at every single place where you're making lists, where you watch someone on television or you read about someone or you encounter them at work or in your neighborhood or in the grocery store. You have to go to all those places and take a deep look into your heart and say, what is going on? Is your faith aligning with your actions? Is the recognition that you didn't earn it by your externals, but now you're judging someone on theirs? How do you reconcile that? And the dirty little secret about you and me is we keep all those lists in our minds of who we think is okay and who we're going to look at with disdain. And James is trying to make us see it. He's making us compare it and bring it back to Jesus, who came to break down all the barriers of race, who came to break down all the barriers of class, who came to break down every single barrier. Jesus, who came to express a revolutionary kind of love. James would look us in the eye and say, your faith in this radical Savior needs to drive a new set of values and criteria in your heart and in your mind. You can't just say, I believe that there is a God, and go on and play the kind of, or go through the motions of religion. He's going to call your faith to this deeper place that would become the real thing. Write this down for number 2. My actions reveal what's deep in me. My actions reveal what is deep in me. Now, in these next several verses we're going to jump into, James kind of gives us a personal example of how this looks, of what this favoritism may look like in the church. And he wants them to understand. Now, see, a good teacher will set up a scenario for you, and then you go, yeah, that's kind of like me, or that's not like me at all, but we have to put ourselves into the story. So here's what he says, starting in verse 2. For instance, suppose someone comes into your meeting dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes in who is poor and dressed in shabby clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor one, you can stand over there, or else sit on the floor. Now understand what you're telling that person. It's like, you don't matter. Who cares? Just find a place, just get out of the way. And he says, well, doesn't this discrimination show that you're guided by the wrong motives? Now, motives that's our heart. That's what drives our actions. And he said, if that's how we operate, then something is wrong inside. Something hasn't connected together. Now, if you're like me, you read a story like that, if here's this person with nice clothes and jewelry and someone who's poor and destitute, maybe homeless, and there's a part of us that says, I would never do that. And we sprain our wrist, patting ourselves on the back. I would never do that. I would never look at someone based on clothes and just say, oh, just go sit on the side. But you, hey, we're going to do something. I would never do that. Can I say good for you? Because I feel the same way. I can't imagine doing that. But would you do it to someone that you disagreed with politically? Would you do it to someone of another race? Would you do it to someone of another religion that you're kind of fearful about and you don't understand? Would you do it to someone who was dirty and smells? Would you do it to a felon who you know who'd committed a crime that you are angry about? Would you do it to a tweaker? What about that coworker that gets on your last nerve every time you're around them? Yeah, that guy. What about him? What about your ex? See, it starts getting personal after a while. If you leave it in the rich and the poor, oh yeah, we can work around that. But what about where it really hits us? What about where our biases truly show? What about in those areas? See, James is not going to let us off the hook. He's not going to let you play religion and say the right words and phrases because he wants to see something real in you. Even though he lived 2,000 years ago, he doesn't know you. The truth is his words are words of love and care. And he's going to keep revealing those parts in us that says, what about this? What about this? If your faith is real, if Jesus has really done that work in you, what about this area? What about this thing? And what it drives us to over and over and over again is to come back to God, to come back to Jesus and go, Jesus, I don't know what to do with this. Man, I'm biased. I'm angry. This is hard for me. But I realize, Lord, that I can't earn this either. That your mercy was shown to me. So would you help me? Would you show me? Would you do a work in my perspective, heart, values, whatever it takes, that my actions begin to reflect you? James is going to keep calling us back to that. And he wants it to intersect every area of your life. So I want to read these next couple verses to you because James begins to reveal about God's heart for people who are in these kind of shadow margin places. He says this, verse 5, listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. There's that phrase again, just giving you a heads up. Okay, it's coming. He says, hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? And aren't they the ones who will inherit the kingdom of God promised to those who love him? Now, James uses this phrase, rich in faith, to describe real wealth. Not stuff like cash and cars and property and houses, stocks and bonds. All that stuff's it's gonna go. It's not gonna last. It's fleeting. It has no eternal value. But James is talking about this real wealth, true spiritual wealth. And he says that's what this rich in faith is all about. Now, this was huge to the followers of Jesus that James is writing to. Because some of these people in this original audience that were receiving this letter, guess what? Some of them were slaves. Some of them had come from a place where they had no rights in their culture at all. They had no voice, and nobody was standing up for them. But the church, not a building, not a 501c3. The church is what? It's who? It's us, right? It's people. The church became the one place on the planet where they were accepted. And suddenly they had value and worth and dignity, and they mattered. It's where they could truly be brothers and sisters. It's where they could truly be part of a family, all because of Jesus. And it was the one place where it's just like, I can't believe I get to be part of this. I can't believe that I've been welcomed in. And there were no classes, and there were no cliques, and there were no divisions, and there were no losers in the church because they understood that God had chosen the poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith. And this kind of revolutionary love, it absolutely shocked the outside world of that day. It completely shocked the culture. And the church became a magnet because there was something so unique and so inviting and so captivating about an environment where you didn't have to say the right thing, you didn't have to look a certain way, you didn't have to wear the right clothes. You didn't have to drive the right chariot. You could just come as you are. And I don't know if we can completely appreciate what a revolution that was to every single religion that Jesus came and said, just come as you are. See, every other religion, I have to work hard. I have to get myself prepared. I have to obey the rules. I have to do the right traditions. I have to make sure I bow and go through all the things, all the little nuances that I have to do, because maybe then there will be this favor that comes from God. And Jesus came along and said, no, because there's nothing you can do to restore the relationship between you and God. There's nothing that you can pay. You don't even have the right currency to make yourself there. So he says, so I've come to be the sacrifice. I've come to pay the price so that you can be reconciled to God. So all you have to do is come. Just come to me. Remember, Jesus said those words. I am the way and the truth and the life. He says, you just come to me. And can I tell you something? That is still God's desire for the church today, to simply come as you are. To know that there is room for you and you can be part of a family. You can be part of God's family. Why? Because you matter. Because you have value and worth. Because you were created by God as a masterpiece. And part of our deep, dark secret is we show favoritism. We have our lists because we want to be put in the class with success. We want to join in with the winners as opposed to being linked to apparent failures. Let me just tell you something. When we do that, listen, when we do that, the church loses its identity. The church loses its power. It loses that magnetism of life and hope in Christ. And the church becomes one more institution, just like all the others. That it's going to rate and grade you and classify you by how you look on the outside. And Jesus comes along and says, no. I see something more in you. I heard this quote one time, man, I tell you, it's haunted me for years, and it's this: you will never look into the eyes of someone that Jesus didn't give his life for. You will never look into the eyes of someone that Jesus didn't give his life for. That's your neighbor. That's your coworker. That's the person you go to school with. That's the presidential candidates. Right? You know? We think, well, I just won't look into their eyes. You know, no, you can't get away that easy. Every single one Jesus has given his life for. So how do I get to make a judgment call? How do I get to classify when Jesus says, I've come for each one? So what do I do? Where do I start? Let me give you the last couple things. The first is this. I need a heart check. And I'll make it easy. You need a heart check too. We all need this examination on the inside of us to say, how am I doing in this? Where are my biases? Where are my prejudices? Where do I make those determinations? Now look at what James says in verse 8. He says, yes, indeed, it is good when you truly obey our Lord's royal command. Do you know what the royal command is? Love your neighbor as yourself. He calls it the royal command. And he says, it's good when you do this, when you begin to see that kind of flesh out in your life. And it's challenging. And I will tell you this, we will all do it imperfectly. We will do it imperfectly. But the question is, are we going to begin to submit ourselves to Christ and say, God, would you help me in this? Give me the strength to even see and respond in ways like you. Then we go, what? But what if I can't? Well, verse 9, he says this, but if you pay special attention to the rich, you are committing a sin, for you are guilty of breaking that law, that royal law of loving others as yourself. When you begin to make those determinations, we're crossing that line and we're breaking relationship with God and others. You know, that's one of the definitions of sin, right? It's not just doing something bad. We kind of do that. Sin is always breaking relationship with God and or breaking relationship with others. Look at the 10 Commandments. It'll always fall into those categories. And when we do that, we're diminishing someone. We're devaluing those. And Christ didn't come for us to devalue others. Look what he goes on to say in verse 10, 11. And the person who keeps all the laws, except one, is as guilty as the person who's broken all of God's laws. And he gives us a couple examples of adultery and murder and all that. Those are the bad ones. But understand what he's really saying here. When we show these places of favoritism, we're breaking God's law. We're breaking relationship because his desire is that all would come to know him. And James brings us face to face with a side of myself that I'd rather ignore, I'd rather move on from, and not even think deeply about. But the ugly truth about me, and I'm not speaking of humanity or people, the ugly truth about me, Dave, is that I'm guilty of this too. And I have to admit it. And God knows it's there. And he's not condemning me, he loves me, but he wants to see me grow in this. It's the times I extend a helping hand, not because someone is truly, the need may really be there, but what I'm really doing is hoping they'll return the favor and help me. It's when I'm extra kind to someone because what I'm really hoping for is there might be some kind of benefit for me. Maybe it's their time or their leadership or their counsel or their donation or their expertise. Or maybe they'll just believe I'm a nice guy or something. Maybe what I'm doing is not so much for them, but maybe that my image will get polished a little bit more and people will think well of me. It becomes self-serving. Or even worse, my motive is simply to get a good story for a sermon. That's the truth about who I can be sometimes inside. And I'm telling you, these words from James go deep in us. He says, what's really happening here? But if this Real Thing series is going to be meaningful, then I've got to do more than just listen and take it in, but I've got to live it out. It's the same for you. You can't just write down some notes and say, okay, that was nice. The question is, how are you going to live it out? What's God going to do in you? And by the way, as God reveals these things, as we walk through and we get hit and challenged, it's not condemnation. It's not God shutting the door on you. He wants you to see truth. He wants to bring about a change in your heart and in your perspective. He wants your faith to be more than just words, but the real thing. Let me give you this last one and we'll close. God calls me to live in mercy because I need mercy. He calls me and he calls you to live in mercy because we all need it. Look at verses 12 and 13. So whenever you speak or whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law of love, the law that sets you free. For there will be no mercy for you if you have not been merciful to others. But if you have been merciful, then God's mercy towards you will win out over his judgment against you. I don't know if you recognize that, but the words mercy and merciful are used 4 times in that one short little passage. Mercy is love in action. It doesn't just say, oh yeah, I love you, I care about you, I'm concerned about you. It says, let me come alongside of you Let me show you. Let me live this out. Mercy recognizes that we are all in the same boat. All of us need rescue. None of us can earn it. We show mercy because we've been given mercy. We were the ones who needed it. Not based on what we'd accomplished or what the outside looks like, but because of who we are and who God's created us to be in here. And every day, you and I have the opportunity to follow Jesus in this, to kind of surrender our lists, to surrender our biases and our prejudices, to give all those things up to God. And I know it's hard. And as I said, we're going to do it imperfectly because we can't see the hearts, only God can. But will I give this to him and allow him to do his deep work in me? I'm going to ask our worship team to start making their way here, but I want to just say one thing in closing. Because this passage has a lot to challenge you who know Christ and follow after Christ and what God expects of us and how he calls us to live and he'll give us the strength to do it. But I want to speak just something right here at the end to those of you who feel like you live in those shadow places and in those margins. Those of you who feel like you don't belong and there's no place for you. Some of you wonder how God could even reach out to someone like you because of what you've done and how you've lived and the mistakes that you've made. Because you live in this place of guilt and shame and you've placed yourself on the outside. Can I just tell you God's word for you, God's heart for you? He says, would you just come home? Would you just come home? Man, you've been fighting and you've been struggling and you've been in this whole process. And yeah, there's mistakes and the church isn't perfect because it's people. But just come home. You've been running for so long to a place where you can find value and worth. Where a Savior, Jesus, will look at you and say, I gave my very life so that you could be made new, so that you could be forgiven, so that you could start over again. Just come home. In the book of Jeremiah, God says, I will give them hearts that will recognize me as the Lord. Now listen to this. And they will be my people, and I will be their God, for they will return to me wholeheartedly. You will be my people. And God says, I will be your God. Today could be the day you simply just come home. Would you bow your heads with me and close your eyes? As we finish this service, I just want to give you an opportunity to take that step. And in just a moment, I'm going to pray a prayer. And I'm going to ask you to pray it along with me, everyone here in this room. And you need to know that there's nothing magic about the words. You don't have to get it just right. It's not about saying something specific. It's about where your heart is. But I'm just going to give you a kind of a model to kind of follow in. Because maybe you're here today and you've been running and you've been struggling and you've been keeping God at arm's length. And maybe today is the day when you say, I just want to come home. I want to be forgiven. I want to be set free. That you could turn to Jesus as your Lord and your leader. And you could find the hope that he offers. So right before I pray, I just want to give you a chance to kind of take that step. If that's you today, you say, I want to know Jesus Christ today. I want to be forgiven. No one's looking around. Would you just raise your hand? Just say, yeah, that's me. Yeah. See you guys on the side. Yeah. Pray this with me today. Lord Jesus, thank you for loving me. And thank you for going to the cross to pay for my sin. When I didn't deserve it, you still did it. Forgive me of my past. Wash me clean. I choose to follow you. In your name, amen.